Well, listen, welcome, Evan Shapiro. Great to chat with you again. Welcome to the OTT Executive Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's very, very nice to hear my name pronounced correctly.
I know it took me a little while too, though, didn't it?
It takes everybody a little while. It's unusual. It's an unusual pronunciation of that name, and people assume it's because I'm super elitist and douchey. I am douchey, but I am not elitist. It is a white trash Philadelphia pronunciation of Shapiro or Shapiro.
All right. Well, we're going with that. Well, thank you for that. So quick intros. I don't feel like we need to for our audience, but, humor us, a little bit about your background, kind of what you're doing.
So right now I'm, I guess, most notably known as the unofficial official cartographer of the media universe. I make these crazy little maps of the media ecosystem as it evolves in real time. I produce a bunch of stuff. I've won a couple of awards for doing that. I do produce podcasts. Right now, I'm a host and a producer on cancel culture, which you can find anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Happy to talk about that. I'm also consulting, and I lead what I call a change agency called eShap.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, you got tentacles in various parts of the industry. Let's start with the media.
That's disgusting. Why would you say that about me?
I don't know.
That's an odd rumor to spread.
Digital tentacles, thrust.
Even creepier.
That doesn't work
now
either.
I'm into tentacle porn. I don't like the way this podcast is going.
Who knows where it's going to go? But anyhow, it's going to be entertaining.
Usual so far.
So let's start with the media, your cartography. Let's start with the media universe. I've read your blogs in the last, few weeks. How dire is it? We're seeing layoffs. We're seeing subscriber retraction. Where are we right now? And if you were to look in your crystal ball into next year, I don't know, how bad is it going to get?
So, there's the more macro thing, which is subscription services in the United States have plateaued with regards to the number of humans and the number of ones that each human is going to have to a certain extent. So for a while now, the channel changing we used to do when we had TVs and cable is now going to be serial churning. You'll go to Netflix for Stranger Things. You'll binge the heck out of it. You'll cancel before the next billing cycle, and then you'll subscribe to HBO Max because Euphoria is coming, or Game of Dragons, or whatever the heck is there, and you'll keep changing. The exceptions to that will be things that have constant needs. Prime is a great example of that. Mm-hmm. Anything that carries live to it. So Hulu Live and YouTube Live, these things are going to go very well. So we've reached a plateau of a certain ecosystem that everybody spent a lot of money and lost a lot of money building over the last 36 months. So that peak was reached substantially sooner than anyone thought it would. That was accelerated unnaturally by COVID and lockdown. So the business models, if in November of 2019, I had told you that Disney would surpass Netflix in total subscribers in less than 36 months, what would you have said?
No, I wouldn't have believed it.
And if I said it's guaranteed to happen, it's definitely going to happen, and on that day, what would you expect the reaction to be when that moment comes? Euphoria?
Surprise. Right.
So that happened in August. And then I think yesterday, Bob Chapek lost his job.
They said that all happened just over the weekend since
Friday.
Friday.
Hello. That's how fast the goalposts have changed. Yeah. So the panic you're feeling in the system right now is Meta hitting the ceiling on their business model 5 years, 10 years before they thought it would. He thought he had 10 years to build the metaverse. Turns out he had 10 months. So they were worth $1 trillion 15 months ago. They're worth under 300 billion, or around 300 billion now. So, Netflix was the model until Netflix wasn't the model. And now TV is the model again, pay and ads and this mix of things. So the panic you're feeling is the retooling of media once again to something. And this time they're really unsure of what it is that they're building. And so they're just going to halt for a second. Mm-hmm. That's how bad it's gotten. Now, as far as the economic indicators going, what is the 5th straight month in October of contraction in the US advertising economy. That's a recession. That's an impression recession, which I said was coming, I think, as far back as the spring. How long that will last, I don't know. That's a great question. There's an excellent chance that all the layoffs you're hearing about are specifically made to improve the stock price of the companies doing them. That's specifically why Zuckerberg laid people off. He said he wasn't going to do it in the earnings call. Then he did it and the stock price went up. And there's a bunch of that going on. Hey, we overspent. So if we cut back now, and that's the game that we're playing a little bit. Once that's done, and if things like supply chain doesn't necessarily become a problem the way that it's been in the auto industry, which has been artificially holding back advertising money because they didn't have cars to sell. If that changes next year and other things self-correct, who knows? This could be a very shallow recession. The indicators for me are watch for Black Friday sales. You want something to specifically watch? Look at what happens. Do we cross I think it's $9 trillion. I don't know, some certain number we're supposed to cross this year in online sales on Black Friday. If the total Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales are up year on year from last year, then that's a good indicator. If people travel a lot more in fourth quarter, specifically in December, than they have in previous years, obviously that's a low number to beat for the last couple of years. But if it's a huge jump, well, perhaps the indicators aren't as rough as we thought, and everyone was really creating a atmosphere of worry as opposed to necessarily big major corrections. However,
so you're saying we might see a pop if we sort of overcorrected potentially.
I would look at those two numbers. Those are really good indicators of how bad fourth quarter will be. There are a bunch of companies: Roku, Warner Brothers Discovery, Disney, Paramount, and a couple of others that said fourth quarter is going to be really bad. And they all took a hit in their stock price. A bunch of other companies said, yes, fourth quarter is going to be bad, but not in the same way. Look at those companies, see how they do. Look at App Store sales in fourth quarter, and specifically in December. The financial security that people over the kitchen table feel this holiday season, starting with Friday, is a great indication of what's going to happen next year. If they're up year on year, especially in online sales, that's a really good indication that people are feeling a little bit more hopeful than perhaps the economy is demonstrating. However, if it's a major dip, that's also equally telling as what's going to happen next year. Those are the two data points I'm looking at next.
So beyond, is there any concern that, the CEOs and the boards out there in the media and entertainment space are going to be managing to their stock price as opposed to the creative destruction they should be managing right now to kind of launch into, phase whatever we are in this whole streaming thing and MVB, virtual MVBD thing?
Well, there's the thing number one, which is what I was talking about with regards to Disney. The number that didn't bother them was the losses at direct to consumer. The number that bothered them was the overall net revenue of the company. It was flat year on year in a year where the parks reopened and had astronomical growth, right? So this should have been a layup to hit 3%, 5% growth. They couldn't do that. That's why Bob's changed places.
It hasn't been gone that long. Less than a year, right?
Less than a year.
Yeah.
They surpassed Disney in subscribers earlier this year. That was the number everyone was charging towards. And he lost his job anyway. So that's how quickly it's changed. I lost the train of thought. What was the question there? Sorry.
No, I just wanted this whole idea of this contract.
Managing.
Between
managing
to the stock price. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think part of that was in reaction to the amount of market cap Disney has dropped, and specifically in the last 90 days. And also the projection for fourth quarter was really bad. And they knew it was going to go bad, way worse before it was going to get better. And I think that's what they were reacting to more. If you read the earnings reports, the third quarter was bad, but it was what Chapek said about fourth quarter, even in kind of very veiled terms. We will reach the peak of our losses in streaming in fourth quarter. I think that was the phrase that set the board off, because in third quarter, they lost, I think, $2 billion just in direct to consumer, which is the reason why they didn't make money as a company. Right, exactly. So it means it's going to get worse in fourth quarter. And then it's not going to just get better instantly. It's going to then tail up. So we're looking at billions and billions and billions. They've already lost tens of billions. So that's why Iger was brought back. I don't know what the plan is there. So, there was floated today that he would sell it to Apple, which seems like an odd outcome for the Walt Disney Company. But I have no privy to whoever floated that balloon, because it was definitely floated.
So behind you, you've got your planets, right? And we've seen this growth and this aggregation. It's really hard to define a media and entertainment company now, because they touch on social and digital and traditional media and so on. Do you see any of those planets, breaking apart, getting smaller? We've talked about disaggregation and reaggregation of media properties. Maybe that's not the best strategy in the future. Where do you see it heading next year?
I think where I see it heading is where I've seen it heading since the beginning of the year, which is the pay TV bundle is falling apart. It's not going to fully disintegrate, and it's going to morph into new things. So put that aside for a second. Just look at Hulu Live and YouTube TV. Those are two really good examples of where that product may go and is going very quickly. Secondarily, there's this other bundle, the triple play, which is video, phone, and broadband bundled together. That too is disintegrating now. The fastest churning sub in the MVPD world is the triple play subscriber, the highest end, highest yield, highest margin customer. Broadband has hit a plateau in the United States as far as distribution goes. And there's a good deal of the country that will likely only use 5G and whatever Wi-Fi they use at work and school and other things for their broadband. So 100% of the United States, so growth in broadband may stall. You have two bundles breaking apart. What will it be replaced by? Increasingly, I believe it's going to be by things like Prime, where you get your television, your music, your gaming, and certain other products like home delivery as part of the package, or Apple One, which is now video and gaming and music and news and fitness and cloud. And perhaps you also get a device. Oh, and when you're in the Fire or the Amazon ecosystem, perhaps you also get a connected television set as part of your overall package on a yearly basis. It's not so far-fetched to think that one company would provide you telephone, video, and broadband. And not just video, but a panoply of channels, the best content ever made.
Well, where did that idea come from? That's like
right,
from
exactly.
the
By
80s.
the way, you'd pay for it, and there'd be a mix of ads, and other services that you might or might not take. Faster broadband, right, exactly.
Sounds like cable television.
That's all where it's all going. The pipes are going to be really important, but with 5G taking up a good percentage of the population, 25%, 30% on a regularly, probably forever forward basis, the shape of the ecosystem remains driven by the gravitational pull of Apple and Amazon and Microsoft and Alphabet in a way that no other companies can. So those are the bundles if you're Disney, if you're Netflix, if you're Spotify, if you're EA, if you're Sony, take Sony out of it. If you're Nintendo, that's who you're competing against. These companies that do all of these services and bundle them in a very convenient and efficient way that lowers churn dramatically. So therefore, regardless of what the cost of sale is, the lifetime value once they're inside is longer and better as a consequence. It's a very long answer.
No, it's a good answer, because I think what you're telling us is it's about stickiness and engagement and keeping people engaged in their community. I remember being very skeptical of the whole Prime strategy, saying, I don't care about free shipping, and maybe I'll go to Prime every now and then because they have video on demand and they have a title that someone else doesn't happen. But when you tie it all together, content, device, the community, that's probably the last on the list to cancel. If I'm trying to
especially now since they're using profits from AWS from their cloud service. So it's not bundled in, really, except that it's behind all the services that you're using anyway. But it generates enough revenue that they can invest in something like Thursday Night Football. They way overpaid for Thursday Night Football and drove up the price for everybody in the space for Thursday Night Football because they had unreal revenues from this completely other planet. It's another good example of why when you're Disney, yeah, you can compete for football on a year-to-year basis, but at some point, and now expand that internationally and think about Indian Premier League cricket and Premier Football. Who has streaming rights to Premier League soccer in Canada? Do you know that? It's probably not the answer that you think it is. So these utility things that we thought are part of just television's nature are now going to be taken up by companies who do several other things as well and who can afford to pay irrational prices because they need market share.
Yeah, and you got to wonder how sustainable is it to rob Peter to pay Paul? If you're like you used AWS as an example, like if you've got profitable businesses over here, how long can you prop up one that's not profitable? So that's a big question. I wanted to switch gears just a little bit. One of the things you've been talking about recently is managing your career in this environment. There's layoffs happening. I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn like, hey, I'll help you out, if you're being laid off or you're managing your change. How do we look at this? How do we manage that process? If, our audience is listening and sort of affected by some of these changes, and maybe how do we, make an opportunity out of it, and grow from it? Any tips there for our audience?
Well, I mean, you go back to, so the reason why Facebook, Meta laid people off, yes, they probably did need to trim the sales there to a certain extent based on all the economics looking at that company. On the other hand, it was very much a reaction to people being angry that he wasn't doing it. And that the decision was meant to please investors. That's happening across the entire media technology ecosystem. And it's going to disproportionately affect information workers, knowledge workers. So, first of all, you have to realize that there are consequences that come from actions outside of your own control, especially right now. There's just panic in the air. And so certain moves are being made just to jerk that knee. And then you have to kind of disassociate the emotion you feel about that, regardless of how long you've been with a company and how many years you've given that company, and think about the rest of your career as your own business. Especially at this moment, when you look at that map and you try to find the island on that map that you're currently floating on, and then try to zoom in and find yourself within that island, because that's a deep search, man. And that's meant to be kind of meta. Taking that moment and understanding how you operate as an individual inside this ecosystem and can operate independent of whatever corporate name is on your business card, to use an anachronistic device, business card. How many of us actually are going to use those moving forward? But regardless of the company you work at, regardless of the single client you may sell to, what is the business that you're in? Why are you doing it? And how can you run it in a way that gives you control of most of the levers? You're never going to control all of them, but gives you control of most of the levers. Now, the earlier you are in your career, the harder it is to understand how to control the majority of levers, let alone most. But the later we get in our careers, the more actually I have found that we need to be incredibly in control of where we live and who we work with and how we spend our time. It matters more the more people who rely on you. So that is what I tend to coach people to do, is to take some time, think of their careers as their own business, hire themselves as their own CEO, and then hold them as much to task as the board of Disney just held Bob number 2. What are the performance metrics that you're looking for? What are the short-term goals? What are the midterm goals? What are the 3-year goals? And keep holding yourself to task on those.
And I mean, there is no employee loyalty anymore. There's no, job loyalty. That's gone away for a long time. So you do have to manage your own career. So we have these changes happening. We have CEOs maybe knee jerk overreacting, managing their stock price. We've got layoffs that are real. Still, we're spending billions on content, and I find that kind of interesting. Good story still sells. Let's talk about that just a little bit. Where do you see the opportunities in content? I'm actually advising a company right now, a new studio streaming service. It seems like there's still a lot of opportunities right there. I mean, maybe if you're on the tech side, maybe switching into, a new content service, or do you see that oversaturating and correcting in the coming years as well?
I think, if you're in the content business and it depends on what kind of content you want to be in. If you want to be on the major streamers and major channels, the move is going to be a way that, just like the movie business contracted the number of films that they distribute per year. They pretty much the only films that get distributed through the movie pipes, the movie theater pipes, are superhero movies and those types of films and sequels. But a lot of the independent filmmaking moved into long form scripted television. The golden days of independent film became the golden days of pay TV, both on streaming and on cable. Now, just like happened to the movie business, the number of those projects that get greenlit will reduce. We've been overmaking them. John Landgraf has been talking about this for years. Peak TV is actually a thing. Think about the millions, tens of millions of dollars being spent per year on programming that is rarely seen. And that we will continue to take huge swings in scripted television. It's just going to be far fewer at-bats. And I think a lot of those resources aren't going to go away. Just look at, actually, as a good case study, look at the limited number of new comedies being made right now in scripted television. All-time low, actually, I think, by last measure. Secondarily, there are going to be lots of big Game of Thrones and House of Dragons and all those other things, but they're going to be fewer than they used to be, and they're going to be replaced in many of the budgets by sports. So it's not going to go away, but Thursday Night Football and Sunday NFL Ticket and hockey and Formula One and a lot of other sports, tennis and basketball and cricket and more and more football, meaning soccer. Mm-hmm. These things are going to scoop up a lot of the dollars that have traditionally gone into these big scripted television shows that may or may not be successful. We're not really sure because no one shares the numbers. Now the numbers are actually going to matter in a different way, not just the number of subscribers you can keep, but how many impressions are you driving and what are the advertisers satisfied? And I think really key, Netflix does not have a sport. They do not have a news channel. They do not have a utility that keeps people coming back to them on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. Amazon has football. Apple has increasing number of sports. All the other channels have utilities like sports and news. I think that's going to be table stakes in the new.
So is that part of the flight to safety? I mean, sports, you've got engaged fans, you've got, the advertising that flows with that, you have the community, and what damage is done to the creatives out there that have a story to tell. How do you still get your story told?
So then the other half of that equation is the creator economy. And then I believe you really have to understand, and this is how I run my business. My business is, I consider myself a creator company. My content is the written word on Substack, on LinkedIn. I do a tremendous amount of videos, some podcasting, but it is an ecosystem built around information as a service. And that service is we constantly create insights out of that. In that, you have to be able to market yourself, manage yourself, and promote yourself or realize the business around yourself in real time. And you need to be able to use the assets at your own disposal to make sure that your content's being seen and that you understand how to monetize it. Having 1 million listeners is good, and it's a really interesting concept. I'm not sure that everybody understands the upside down economics of truly monetizing that, right? Having 100,000 subscribers who pay on a monthly basis is probably economically more satisfying for the creator at the heart of that content than the former, 1 million who don't pay, because it's a different set of economics and a different relationship. Now, a mix between the two is really a way that you can earn a middle-class living as a creator in this moment in time. as a studio, as a mini studio or as a production company, the way that you can test new intellectual property out on TikTok, on podcasting, on LinkedIn, on Substack, in a way that the machine of corporate America economy, the corporate content economy, will never let you. The days of pilots from independent makers, those are going to be fewer and far between. Because a lot of the money's going to sports, and because there's these huge deals with Ryan Murphy and J.J. Abrams that they have to satisfy on an ongoing basis. So if you cannot carve your own way as a creator, as a storyteller, as a producer, as an ideator in the creator economy part of this map, which includes places like TikTok, big corporate platforms, then it's going to be harder and harder to sustain, frankly, in whatever comes next. That's again a very long answer, but
no, it's interesting to me, and I think about this a lot. If you were a creator, I know you are a creator, where would you place your bets? Are there specific underserved content niches, international content, or particular stories that still have legs, that are original and interesting? Again, I know what the corporate CEO is going to do. They're going to fly to safety. You mentioned sports, layoffs.
Yeah, I mean, packaging your product is always going to be the biggest thing. So if you can walk in there with things that are just undeniable, stars, but more increasingly, that's going to be IP, intellectual property. So the thing I would say is develop a piece of intellectual property on your own. Right? Find a book, buy the rights, develop it into something, or start a podcast, build an audience, turn it into something provable and true, whether that's a subscriber base or a listener base or a combination. Whatever your piece of IP is will be stronger by dint of having that behind it when you walk in and pitch it to the corporate side. I'm not saying don't go to the corporate side, just arm yourself, prepare yourself, have data to back up whatever it is that you're pitching. That's basically the root of my entire business is I take a lot of data and say things that people believe are true, and somehow I get away with it.
Because they're often very true and they kind of predict the future. We did a session a couple of years ago where the previous year you had done 10 predictions. This would have been like 19. I don't know. It was like, it was 2019 or something. And I think 9 out of 10 of them were like spot on, came around. The 10th one we kind of gave you. Do you remember?
I think you're being very generous. I'm not sure that's how the data stacks up, but
I'll have to go back and look.
Thank you very
much
much for remembering it that way.
But so I want to kind of switch gears again. We've been talking about the media universe and how to manage your career and something. I definitely want to personalize these podcasts and learn a little bit more about Evan Shapiro. Something you can tell our audience that may not know about you, a hobby, anything like that.
So at the beginning of the podcast, I said something. What did I say? Well, anyway, I had a really
you had a good one
here. Yeah. Well, I think the most personal thing is I never graduated from college. So I dropped out of college because I went there to be a storyteller. And the people who were paying my way didn't agree with that choice. And I then went on my own way. And to this day, I continually am trying to make it okay that I dropped out of college. That's kind of the basis of everything that I do. So this map is me taking data and saying, see, I'm a smart boy. That's probably too much information for everybody. But when you look at that map, know that it's based in a neuroses of things that we wish we had done better in our lives.
Well, wait a minute. I gave you a trophy last year. It was OTT Genius. So that's got to count for something.
Genius.
Right?
I know.
Genius.
And yet it never fills the void that this redoing this map by hand in PowerPoint. It's like the hair shirt I wear around for not having a degree on my wall. So UMass, if you're listening, I could really use an honorary degree to make everything feel better.
It's got to be etched. I have a friend who said that his goal in life is to get his name on as many plaques as possible. And I said, really? Is that right?
Every time yeah. Well, that's why, hence those. Anyway.
You got a couple there. Well, listen, Evan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being the voice, the independent voice in the industry that you are. I love your podcast and your blog and your Substack and everything. There's a lot of insights there. I encourage people to check out his site, which is Evan.
I just Google eShap War and Peace. You'll find it.
Yep. And no bars held there for sure. Thank you so much for your time. Once again, this is the OTT Executive Podcast, where we talk to industry leaders and get to know a little bit from them and a little bit about them. So signing off. Thanks so much, Evan.
Take it easy.
Awesome. Great.